During her daily jog, Marissa's peace of mind was suddenly disrupted when she encountered an unexpected companion, a wild black bear who was staring directly at her. Noticing her fear, the animal instinctively crouched closer to the ground. Although she was terrified, Marissa felt compelled to follow in its footsteps as the bear walked away from the trail, looking back and pausing to wait for her. Little did she anticipate the astonishing sight that this bear would lead her to. Staring at the bear, she wondered, should I really do this? Am I really about to follow this unfamiliar bear into the forest? Her initial reaction upon seeing the bear was a desire to flee, but an unknown feeling prevented her from doing so. The bear appeared calm and gentle, showing no signs of anger or threat, and it made no attempt to harm or scare her. As the bear crouched down and cautiously walked towards her, it gently placed one paw on Marissa's leg, seemingly trying to communicate. Marissa held her breath, acknowledging the potential danger of a brutal animal attack that could send her to the hospital. However, to her surprise, her fear vanished, and she sensed an inexplicable need to assist the bear. This was the closest she had ever been to a bear. Although she had heard tales about their dangers and the necessity of maintaining a safe distance, she couldn't help but wonder, "But you're not that mean, are you?" she whispered softly as the bear slowly moved away, periodically glancing back at her. A group of people witnessed the situation unfold and shouted, "Quick, Marissa! Run away from that bear now!" Seeing that Marissa showed no intention of leaving and seemed to contemplate following the bear into the bushes, they exclaimed, "That lady is out of her mind. She doesn't know what she's doing." However, Marissa was confident in her actions and knew precisely what to do. "All right, I'm going for it," she exclaimed to herself. She moved towards the bushes alongside the trail and brushed aside twigs and leaves. After a few steps, she found herself completely surrounded by trees, bushes, and foliage, with no one else in sight, just her and the bear. It was admittedly a bit frightening, but she recognized that the animal was undoubtedly in need of assistance. The bear proceeded to leisurely walk further into the woods, and Marissa trailed behind, careful not to stumble over any tree roots. In a hushed tone, she pondered, "Where are you leading me?" Contemplating whether she should persist without notifying anyone of her presence, she took a moment to think and decided that she lacked the time to make a call. However, she had a backup plan, just in case. To be safe, she decided to share her whereabouts with her boyfriend, Derek. Swiftly, she sent a text message saying, "Sharing location in case of emergency. Will explain later." After stashing her phone in her pocket, she ensured it was on silent mode. She reasoned that if someone messaged or called, the noise could startle the bear, an outcome she hoped to avoid. Throughout their journey, the bear continually glanced over its shoulder to confirm Marissa's presence. Although not sprinting, Marissa needed to exert herself to maintain pace with the fast bear. This odd behavior left Marissa questioning the bear's motives. Since the bear seemed uninjured, she couldn't help but wonder what urgent situation prompted it to seek assistance from a human. While walking further into the woods, Marissa realized the sun was setting, making her realize that her intended 20-minute jog was running late. Deciding to try to return home before nightfall, she reminded herself of the urgency of avoiding being stranded in the forest, regardless of the bear's whereabouts. Finally, the bear slowed down a bit and started sniffing around. Marissa did not know much about bears, but she thought it seemed like he was searching for something. "What is it? What are you looking for?" she asked, looking around the area as well, trying to spot anything unusual. Suddenly, she heard an odd noise and it startled her. It was the bear. It was growling. Marissa was suddenly terrified, and she deeply regretted her decision. What was I even thinking? Following a random bear into the woods, all alone. Those people were right, I am crazy, she thought to herself, desperate to get away from the bear and out of the forest. However, the bear wasn't growling at her. Marissa noticed that the bear was looking at something behind a thick tree. It was just out of her sight. She was scared to move, not wanting to attract the bear's attention, but she was too curious to see what it was growling at. She slowly took a few steps towards the tree, and when she was finally able to see what was behind it, she gasped. She realized that she was in a very, very dangerous situation, but she still did not completely understand what was going on. Why did the bear lead her here? What did it want from her? She thought it had been asking her for help, but she still did not understand what. And it was not like she could ask it and it would just tell her. You see, the bear had led her to a campsite. There was a tent, and whoever had stayed there had made a campfire the night before. The ashes were still a bit warm. However, there was nobody inside the tent, and it had been left open. It seemed like the camper had left in a hurry, and Marissa couldn't help but look inside. She saw that there were clothes, supplies, and maps scattered all around, and instead of finding answers, it only raised more questions. Who was staying here? And why had they left in such a rush? Suddenly, Marissa was not as eager to leave, and she was determined to find answers. Something odd was going on here, and she wanted to know what exactly. Marissa bit her lip, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. The sun's rays pierced through the dense foliage, casting sporadic spots of brightness in the dim clearing. While every instinct told her to head back, the bear's movements held her back. Its eyes bore into hers, the intensity undeniable, like a plea she couldn't quite understand. Upon further examination, Marissa noticed peculiar things. The tent's entrance showed signs of a hurried exit, skewed zippers and fabric slightly torn. Inside, amidst the clothes and maps, she found a small locket with a picture of a family and a camera with a half-filled memory card. Curiosity grew as she wondered what might be on it. Was there a connection between its contents and the sudden departure? Before she could probe further, the bear let out a soft grunt, its eyes still fixed on her. Any attempt she made to sidestep was met with the bear's large form adjusting to stay in her path. It was clear the animal wasn't going to let her leave so easily. Marissa hesitated, her heart racing. She needed to figure out how to communicate with this wild creature, to understand its motives. Looking into the bear's eyes, Marissa tried mimicking its gestures. She pointed at herself, then the tent, and then back at the bear, attempting to convey her confusion. In response, the bear let out a sequence of low grunts and pawed at the ground near the tent. Marissa's eyes widened as she began to grasp the bear's intentions. It wasn't about her, but rather something inside the tent or around the campsite. She paused for a moment, letting the silence of the forest envelop them. A soft wind rustled the leaves, and she felt the gravity of the moment. This was nature communicating in its rawest form. In the depth of the bear's eyes, she saw trust, hope, and desperation. Marissa nodded slowly, signaling that she would stay and help. Whatever was going on, they were now connected in their pursuit of the truth. Among the scattered belongings, Marissa's fingers brushed against the soft, worn leather of a diary. Pulling it out, she dusted off the pine needles and leaves, revealing an embossed bear on the cover. The diary seemed out of place amid the modern gear. The pages looked aged, and a sense of history clung to it, beckoning her to open it. The first pages were filled with neat handwriting, detailing the traveler's excitement about his journey into the forest. There were mentions of breathtaking sunsets, nights under the starlit sky, and the simple joy of being surrounded by nature. He wrote of his awe at the myriad of sounds echoing in the night, wondering about the creatures that made them. As Marissa flipped through the pages, she noticed more and more sketches of bears. The entries began highlighting encounters with them, documenting their habits and movements. One passage read, "Their majesty is unparalleled, especially the black bears. I find myself drawn to them, spending hours just observing." It was evident that the traveler had developed a profound interest in these magnificent creatures. The traveler's admiration for the bears took a more focused turn. "I've heard tales of a rare white-furred bear cub in this region," he penned. Capturing such a unique moment with this elusive being on film would be monumental. His desire was clear. He wished to document this cub, believing it could be the centerpiece of a groundbreaking documentary. The tone of the diary shifted drastically. No longer was it just admiration, an obsession began to emerge. Entries were filled with countless hours spent tracking, observing, and at times even disturbing the habitats to get a glimpse of the rare cub. "I must find it," he wrote desperately. "I can feel its close sketches of traps and notes on luring techniques littered the margins, hinting at a dark turn in the traveler's intentions." Brimming with excitement, the traveler's handwriting almost trembled on the page. "I saw it today, the myth in the flesh. A white-furred cub, radiant and unspoiled, playing near a stream. Its innocence moved me, but the desire to capture it on film consumed me even more." The entry spoke of his surprise and wonder, but underneath it all was an underlying hunger, an itch to get closer. As Marissa read on, the depth of the traveler's ambition unveiled itself. "This footage could be my masterpiece. People around the world will know my name, and all the challenges I've faced will pale in comparison to the accolades I'll receive. The world has never seen a bear like this, and I will be the one to introduce it to them." It was evident his goals were rooted in personal glory rather than pure appreciation of nature's marvel. Entries began to detail intricate tools and traps. "The nets are ready," one read, "and I've set up cameras in all possible locations. The sedatives are a precautionary measure. I don't want the cub hurt." Diagrams of traps and maps marking potential bear locations were scribbled on the pages. Marissa's heart raced as she began to grasp the extent of the traveler's plans. Dread filled Marissa as she continued. The traveler's obsession had turned dark. "This cub is mine by destiny. If it won't come to me willingly, I have measures to ensure it does." There were sketches of cages and details about bait. She felt a chill realizing that the traveler was willing to do whatever it took, no matter how unethical, to achieve his dream. The last entry was dated just 2 days ago. "Tomorrow is the day," the traveler wrote confidently. "The bait is set, the traps primed. Once I have the cub, I'll make a swift exit before anyone becomes the wiser. The world awaits our grand reveal." Marissa's hands shook as she closed the diary. The urgency of the bear's insistence became clear. It wasn't just trying to keep her here, it was trying to communicate a desperate plea for help. Marissa reopened the diary, her eyes scanning each entry with renewed urgency. She was searching for any specifics about where the traveler had set his traps or where he'd last seen the young bear. Every word, every hastily drawn map, became a potential clue. Her fingers paused on a page with a particularly detailed drawing of a cave system. It hinted at a location near a meandering stream. Stories from her childhood crept back into her mind, tales of heartless poachers and traders who saw animals as mere commodities. The white fur of the bear cub would be a prize in illicit markets. The thought made her stomach churn. She remembered warnings from locals about the rise in wildlife trade and how animals were increasingly at risk. Marissa felt the weight of the decision pressing on her. Should she rush to the nearest ranger station, potentially wasting precious time? Or should she use the clues at her disposal and venture forth herself? She considered the bear outside, its insistent behavior, its silent plea. It was almost as if it trusted her to do the right thing. Reflecting on the bear's actions, everything began to make sense. It wasn't just any bear, it was the cub's mother. The persistence, the blocking of the camp's exit, and even the subtle hints it gave for her to find the diary she had been trying to guide Marissa all along. Perhaps the mother bear had watched the traveler, sensed his intentions, and had desperately sought an ally in Marissa. As the setting sun cast a golden hue over the forest, Marissa sat for a moment, absorbing everything. She thought of her own family and the depths she'd go to protect them. The love and ferocity of a mother bear would be unmatched in the wild. It was a love that crossed species, a universal bond. And in that moment, Marissa made her decision. She would do whatever it took to reunite the mother with her cub. The forest was still, but as Marissa attuned herself to its sounds, a distant cry pierced the silence. It was faint, almost drowned by the rustling leaves and chirping crickets, but unmistakably a cry. Each whimper and echo tugged at her heart, fueling her with an urgency she hadn't felt before. She began moving in the direction of the sound. With every step, the cries seemed to grow both clearer and more distressed. Marissa treaded carefully, using the echoes as her compass. The adult bear, sensing her commitment, walked beside her, occasionally glancing in the direction of the sounds, confirming they were on the right path. The bear's behavior changed as they ventured deeper into the forest. Every now and then she'd stop, raise her nose to the wind, and sniff deeply. There was a clear anxiety in her eyes and urgency in her steps. At times she'd growl softly, as if urging Marissa to quicken her pace. Suddenly Marissa stumbled upon a trap. It was empty but freshly set, the metal gleaming ominously. For a moment her heart sank, fearing the worst. Nearby she found a camera, discarded in haste. The lens had captured images of the forest, but no bear. While it wasn't the discovery she hoped for, it was a sign they were on the traveler's trail. Not allowing despair to set in, Marissa turned her attention back to the distant cries. With the bear at her side, they continued their quest. Each clue, whether it be a broken branch or a fresh footprint, gave them hope. The connection between the woman and the bear grew stronger, bound by their shared determination. Together they were resolute in their mission to find the missing cub. As Marissa and the bear pushed further into the forest, they came upon a clearing where several large cages stood. Each one was open, but clear marks and scratches on their inside spoke of recent occupants. More concerning was a smaller cage, lying on its side, its door broken open. Tufts of bear fur were caught on its jagged edges, and nearby a tranquilizer dart lay discarded in the dirt. The implications chilled Marissa to the bone. Without hesitation, Marissa turned on her heels, heading back to the campsite. Every minute counted now, and the pressing weight of the cub's fate pushed her forward. The adult bear, sensing the urgency, matched her pace, their combined determination cutting through the dense forest. The campsite and its possible answers loomed large in Marissa's mind. The tranquilizer dart she found had jogged a memory from the diary. The traveler had mentioned having wire cutters in the tent, essential for setting up traps and hopefully dismantling them too. If there were more cages or snares, those cutters could be the key to freeing the trapped animals, including the bear cub. Reaching the campsite, Marissa dove into the tent. She rummaged through the scattered belongings, her hands sifting through maps, clothes, and equipment. Her fingers brushed against cold metal, and she pulled out a set of wire cutters. The feeling of relief was short-lived, however, as a rustling sound outside caught her attention. Emerging from the tent, Marissa's eyes darted around, trying to identify the source of the sound. The surrounding shadows seemed to play tricks on her, but then, from the edge of the clearing, a pair of eyes glinted back at her. Someone had been watching, waiting, and Marissa knew she was no longer alone in her mission. Her heart pounding in her chest, Marissa remembered seeing a knife earlier when going through the belongings. A weapon might give her some advantage, or at least a feeling of security. Swiftly but with quiet precision, she went back into the tent, digging past the maps and clothes. After what felt like an eternity, her fingers brushed against the cold, ridged handle. Clutching the knife firmly, she braced herself for the challenge ahead. As she readied herself, muffled voices became distinguishable just beyond the clearing. The low tones held an ominous weight. 2, maybe 3 people were discussing something, their words blending with the forest's ambient sounds. "I told you she'd come back here," one voice hissed. Marissa's heart rate quickened. They were talking about her. She crouched low, using the tent as cover. Peering out, she caught glimpses of moving shadows. Every rustle of the leaves, every snap of a twig felt exaggerated. As one of the figures approached her hiding spot, Marissa held her breath, praying she was well concealed. But then the shadow paused, its head turning directly towards her. Their eyes locked. It was the traveler from the diary, his face grizzled, an expression one of frustration. Behind him, 2 others emerged, holding nets and gear. Looking for something, he taunted, eyes fixated on Marissa's. She clutched the knife tighter, its cold presence a meager comfort against the odds she faced. The standoff between her and the traveler was palpable, each second stretching on endlessly. In a split-second decision, Marissa lunged to the side, using the element of surprise to her advantage. The traveler moved to intercept, but the adult bear, sensing the danger, let out a deep roar, causing a momentary distraction. Seizing the chance, Marissa dashed into the woods, knife in hand, hoping to use the dense underbrush to elude her pursuers. The chase was on. Dodging through the undergrowth, Marissa nearly ran headfirst into the towering figure of the bear. It stood, eyes locked onto hers, and she could feel the impatience emanating from its massive frame. Its heavy breaths and shifting weight were a clear indicator. Time was of the essence. The bear, though intimidating in stature, seemed to communicate a shared goal and a plea for haste. The forest around Marissa felt alive but menacing. Each rustling leaf, every distant snap of a twig reminded her of the relentless pursuers. The shadows played tricks on her eyes, making figures appear and disappear. The thick foliage both protected and threatened. Creatures watched from the shadows, and Marissa couldn't help but feel like prey in a vast, dangerous expanse. Drawing a deep breath, Marissa chose to focus on the bear. It seemed to have an innate sense of direction, leading her through the safest paths. Though logic screamed for her to seek the nearest exit from the woods, her gut told her to trust this beastly guardian. With each passing moment, their bond grew stronger, their paths more intertwined. Pushing through a dense patch of ferns, Marissa stumbled upon a clearing where a heartbreaking scene awaited her. The cub, with its innocent eyes, was trapped in a net, whimpering softly. It struggled weakly, its strength evidently waning. Nearby, crude tools and cages bore witness to the cruel intentions of the traveler and his accomplices. Seeing the cub ensnared, everything clicked into place for Marissa. The adult bear's behavior, its determination to keep Marissa at the camp, and its urgency in the forest, it was all an attempt to save its baby. The sheer desperation, fear, and hope in the bear's eyes resonated with Marissa. They weren't just animals, they were a family fighting for survival. Upon closer inspection, the intricacy of the netting around the cub made Marissa's stomach churn. It wasn't merely an abandoned piece of equipment, this was a deliberate trap. The robust and cunningly designed snare was clearly intended for creatures of considerable strength. The sharp barbs embedded into the net and a remote alarm system suggested that this wasn't the work of amateurs. This was a trapper's masterpiece. Drawing a steady breath, Marissa approached the ensnared cub with the utmost caution. The adult bear's eyes tracked her every move, its concern palpable in the tense air. Marissa knew the stakes. One wrong move could provoke the bear or cause further harm to the cub. Softly murmuring words of comfort, she carefully began to work on the snare, trying to find its weak points. Every tug, every cut brought Marissa closer to the cub. Her hands, though trembling slightly, moved with determination. The cub's distressed whimpers turned to curious sniffs as it felt her gentle touch. Each soothing word, each careful maneuver made it evident to the watching mother Marissa was here to help. In the midst of this crisis, an unbreakable bond was forming between human and bears. With one last pull, the cub was free. It immediately scampered to its mother, burying its face in her thick fur. But their surroundings didn't allow for a prolonged reunion. Distant voices grew louder, and the rustling of underbrush signaled approaching danger. The traveler and perhaps others were drawing near, and their intentions were clear. The adult bear, sensing the imminent threat, positioned herself between Marissa and the oncoming danger, shielding both the girl and her cub. Her growls echoed with ferocity, warning any who dared approach. The sheer magnitude of her protective stance made Marissa realize the strength and bravery of a mother's love. It was a love that transcended species, and Marissa knew they were united in their fight against the looming menace. The dense woods resonated with the cub's excited cries as it found solace in its mother's embrace. The two bears entwined, nuzzling and playfully swiping at one another. It was a sight of pure joy, an intimate moment of a family once separated, now reunited. Marissa stood at a distance, her heart swelling with happiness and relief, overwhelmed by the powerful bond she was witnessing. The mother bear approached Marissa, her deep eyes holding a warmth that seemed almost human in its depth. With a gentle nudge, the massive creature rested her head briefly against Marissa's, a silent thank you that spoke louder than any words. The cub, too, sauntered up, playfully tugging at her shoelaces. It was a moment of pure, unspoken gratitude, an acknowledgement of the bond they had formed. Following the bear's lead, Marissa soon found herself walking along a path she hadn't noticed before. The trees began to thin out, and the familiar sounds of the world beyond started to filter through. With every step, the forest's embrace loosened, and she could see the edge of the woods. The bears paused, seemingly understanding they had to part ways, but ensuring she was safely guided out. Stepping out of the forest, the sunlight seemed a tad brighter, the air a touch fresher. As she made her way back to her life, Marissa couldn't shake off the overwhelming emotions she felt. The adventure had not only been a test of her courage, but a journey of self-discovery. She had forged a bond with nature, with the wild, and it had changed her profoundly. Back in the midst of her daily routine, Marissa often found herself lost in memories of her time in the forest. The office buzz, the city's hum, couldn't drown out the wilderness whisper in her ear. Every rustling leaf, every bird's song took her back. She wore the lessons of trust, unity, and love as a badge of honor, cherishing the incredible bond she had formed with the wild. The events of this story are entirely fictional and are products of the author's imagination. Images included are meant for illustration purposes only. Any resemblance to actual events, places, or persons, living or dead, are entirely coincidental.